they become quite interested in it.
That's a very interesting point that you bring up there, and I've been talking about that with previous guests also on this program, that potentially all those people that are out there and are intrigued by symbolism and mythology and trying to interpret that, they actually, just as you say, actually can bring some new light to this area that even those initiated into lodges or whatever actually don't have access to. But you mentioned that you've been in correspondence with a few about the interpretations of symbolism. Do you care to share some of that with us? Is this about symbols itself, or more like on paintings? Do you have an example?
Well, the example in particular in that case was a document that one of my sort of co-researchers, Greg Jenner, unearthed, that was from the Society of Rosicrucians in East Anglia in England. And on the front of this document, which it turns out was the document that should not have been in the public domain, I don't quite know where Greg got it from, but he managed to get hold of it, and it was authentic enough. On the front of this document was a sort of what I would sort of term the Dark Star and its 7 companion planets, which is seemingly quite common symbolism that's all over the place, actually, when you start looking for it. And the Dark Star was sort of surrounded by a sort of a mantle or a halo, like a winged disc, and it had these 7 extra stars around it. It was quite clear to me that this was the Dark Star. So I put it up on my website, and Greg sort of highlighted it as well, and there it sat. And then around about I don't know, maybe about 6 months ago, I had an email from someone in the order. I won't say what his name is, but he named himself as Frater, the brethren chap of one of these orders, and this particular order actually. And he said, this is very, very interesting, what you've written here, and here's some information that would be of help to your research. And he gave me this sort of information that related to what this document was, and he explained that it shouldn't have been in the public domain and that we shouldn't even have hold of it. But the thing that sort of struck me was that he seemed interested by what I was saying, and not from the point of view of, I think you're onto something here, or you shouldn't be talking about this or anything like that. He was just, this is interesting. What an unusual take on this particular thing. I'm really interested in this, and I think some of my fellow members of my order might be interested in this. And it's sort of really sort of saying what I was explaining or discussing with you just a minute ago, which is that the people in these orders, the Freemasons, that they have access to the material that we don't, or shouldn't have, but that doesn't necessarily mean they know what the source of it is or what it means. And so he was saying to me, I'll have a chat with my fellow members and see if we can't invite you down to give a talk at our lodge. And I was a bit taken aback by this, because I wrote back to him and said, I could come down and give you a talk, but, you lot got the advantage of knowing a lot more about this than I do, And he said, don't worry about that, you come down. But as it hasn't actually happened yet. But as a sort of interesting aside to this, my dad's a Freemason, and has been for decades, and he's actually a member of this lodge as well, although he's a passive member of this lodge. And, my dad and I were talking about this, and he said, Andrew, if you go and give this talk to this, Society of Rosicrucians in East Anglia, I'm still a member of the lodge, I can come and listen to your talk. So, should it go ahead, at some point, I hope it does, should it go ahead, I'll have the strange situation of actually having my dad in the audience, which would be most strange. But, there you go. That's how all that came about.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah,
that symbolism that I was discussing, like I said, it appears all over the place. It appears in sort of Gnostic material. It appears in popular stuff nowadays. I've even seen it in the Lord of the Rings films. It just pops up all over the place.
Really? About Lord of the Rings, where does this pop up? You care to share?
Well, it appears in 2 places actually. One of them is it appears in the one of the trees of, one of the flags of Gondor. It has the symbolism there, but most remarkably is the door going into the tunnels of Moria, where they're trying to in the film, the first film I think it is, they're trying to get through this particular portal, and on the door are symbols, and they actually look very Freemasonic, to be honest. They've got a lot of Masonic stuff going on there, but in the middle of it is a crown and 7 stars, and it's absolutely spot on for the kind of symbolism that I believe is employed for this object. And so I wrote quite a lot about that, and a lot of people thought that was absolutely mad. But see, from my point of view, someone like Tolkien, who wrote those books, he was a very learned man, and he did his research quite effectively into, the traditions of sort of ancient English people and so on. And it just, I wouldn't be remotely surprised if he was a member of some lodge somewhere, or B, he just had access to some strange little book somewhere that had this stuff on it, and he just copied it and put it in his book.
Of course, I mean there's lots of very very interesting studies that has gone into trying to trace the origins of where Tolkien actually got the story from, and there's talks about something known as the Red Book, and there's a few other ones also, but the main idea of all of this is, of course, that Tolkien was merely retelling the story of the previous ages of this planet, but he formatted it in such a way, in fiction form, I should say, so that it can be related to people and they can read it. But as soon as you would put a label on it and say that, okay, this is the history of the world, I mean, he probably would be scoffed at. But now he managed to get this story out to a huge number of people on the planet, and in that way continue the storytelling, to disseminate the mythology, basically.
Quite possibly. I mean, it's a fascinating concept. I mean, I think whenever any of us look into something, we all have a tendency to see something that relates to our own experience. And I mean, a lot of people who look at Tolkien's work, the Lord of the Rings, they tend to see it in terms of the First World War. They tend to look at it in terms of the idea of going to the front and your innocence being lost, and all the destruction and everything that goes on, and coming back afterwards, and your life's been sort of changed irrevocably, and so on. And so I suppose your standard historian or people who would look at the literature would see it from a contemporary point of view, and see it from the point of view of the after effects of the First World War. But as you say, he was a professor, and he was a very learned man, and he did his research, and from that point of view, the sort of emotional impact of the First World War and the story that he was trying to relate there may have been secondary to deeper stuff still that was relating to again, potentially catastrophes, previous periods in our prehistory where humans were almost wiped out, and it was survival to just keep the race going, and I wouldn't dismiss that at all, because I think that is where a lot of the oral traditions stem from. Around the globe is memories of great catastrophe that occurred thousands, possibly tens of thousands of years before, that have passed down to us.
That's right. Current themes that keep popping up, I guess, are often related to alchemy. What is the connection there, do you think?
Well, again, it's symbolism, and you have to be somewhat careful not to just sort of read into things what you want to see. But alchemy, to me, is another example, and a very good example, of symbolism that's passed down through generations, that holds secret answers within it, but that is persecuted or is heretical, or in some way is not something that you want in the hands of the general population, or certainly in the hands of the persecutors of the dominant sort of religious authority of whatever period you're talking about.
Mm.
And alchemy, I would argue, is like that the symbolism of alchemy is very, very ancient indeed. And the idea that alchemy was simply a method of producing gold from lead is very simplistic.
Yeah.
I'm sure that alchemy was used for that end, but the symbolism that it employs is very, very ancient and very, very colourful and illustrative and fascinating in its own right.
Mm.
So, I've got quite an interest in alchemy anyway, because as we sort of discussed right at the beginning of this, I sort of did a degree in chemistry, and alchemy was sort of the precursor to chemistry. So
Yeah.
it always fascinated me anyway.
Yeah.
So when I looked through books on alchemy, and I started to look at some of this quite bizarre, very, very strange motifs and illustrations and things, again, things started to pop out at me to do with this research with the Dark Star, the idea of sort of king being reborn and the redness of, the rebirth. And there were some particular images to do with planets and the numbers of planets and the appearance of sort of red suns and yellow suns together that indicate to me that the alchemists knew a lot more about this perhaps than we do, that they were, in receipt of symbolism from very ancient days that was saying, look, there are two suns, there are two kings, that the second king returns every so often, that there is a rebirth, there is a regeneration, there is a resurrection of the king, that the red star every so often is reborn in the sky, and it creates change and it creates evolution, and that in essence is the gold that comes out of lead. The return of the star causes evolution, it causes change and the start of a new age. So that was my interpretation of alchemy, and some of my website is devoted to looking at particular pieces of symbolism, particular diagrams or illustrations that I think really stand out and make you think.
Yeah.
This makes a lot when you think about the existence of a dark star, when you think about the existence of a second sun. If you look at these diagrams, suddenly they make a lot more sense because they appear to be pointing in that direction.
Yeah, indeed, and this is a fascinating area. As looking at your site right now, and I see that you have one of King Tutankhamun's, his breastplate, among other things. And there's an interesting connection there, just about the fact of that there is a connection with cataclysms, because on that breastplate he had there is a small piece of glass that is basically made from what scientists believe is a meteor impact. Some actually have tied it back that it might be evidence for ancient atomic warfare, but nonetheless it seems to indicate that something at least happened, either if it was a meteor that struck, this is a big cataclysm, or if this was an ancient warfare, that's even bigger, I guess, cataclysm in a psychological way. But so that there's kind of these small hints or something, kind of an undercurrent in a lot of different art, a lot of different mythology. I mean, in the end, if we speak about the lost myth that either if it's the initiated secret society members or whoever is trying to recreate or find this again, do you think that this could tie in very much also with the fact that this is about potentially then the returning of the gods, as it were, the returning of those that potentially created